Hello, friends. I am ecstatic to introduce you to Parissa Behnia. Today, we're going to be talking about some of her words of wisdom that she shares with her audience. Parissa, welcome to the program. I'm excited to learn from you. And if you could, kick us off with telling us a little bit about you and your message.
Oh my goodness. Well, it's so much fun having this conversation with you today. A little bit about me. I am on a 25-year mission to be the world-renowned coach and advisor to modern badasses and those who lead modern badasses. Who is a modern badass? They are leaders who go 80 miles an hour in a 45-mile-an-hour zone without checking to see if people are strapped in for the ride, let alone interested in the destination. They are your visionaries. They are your change agents. They are your big strategic thinkers. And while every organization needs them, sometimes the organization feels like they might be too much. My job, my mission in this life is to help them go from being seen as too much to just right.
Oh, it's amazing. I'm really curious to understand what was it that got you focused on saying, I want to target the modern badass and help them become just right?
It's a great story. I am one of those people. In my corporate life, I had so many ideas. I had so many big ideas, and I was moving a million miles a minute. And I was so excited by what I contemplated in my mind's eye. And I didn't always understand how to read the room or to see if people were with me. And so it became very difficult for my leaders to know how to lead me. And it became difficult for me to know what questions to ask in terms of the support I was seeking. And so much later, hindsight being 2020, I realized I'm not the only person who's felt that way. And in as much as that you and I know who Thomas Edison is, who Steve Jobs is, who Serena Williams is, who Malala Yousafzai is, I worry about the badasses out there we'll never know because someone sidelined or silenced them, or they sidelined or silenced themselves. I worry about the opportunity cost. Like, what gift to society do we not have? Whether it's technology, culture, sport, science, all of the things. And because of my own experience, I don't want other people to feel misunderstood and frustrated the way that I felt misunderstood and frustrated in my corporate life.
Mm. So making sure we uncover those unknown badasses in our midst.
Right. And support the ones that are very clear and that we're acquainted with. They might be the head of innovation of a group. They might be the head of strategy of the group. And other people might call them bulls in china shops. And they might be. So how do we get them to break the dishes they should be breaking without breaking all of the dishes?
Well, let's talk about that. What, in your experience, so you do coaching and you help people navigate from maybe breaking the wrong dishes to breaking the right dishes. What are some of the maybe misconceptions or stories that these badasses are telling themselves that you're able to shift to help them be more impactful?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. Thank you so much for asking. Uh, One of the biggest explorations I do with my clients is getting clarity on their most important values. And then once they're clear on what those values are, how do they clearly describe them to the people around them so that they are better understood? So if there's passion, if there's energy, if there's excitement, people know what value to assign it to and say, oh, okay, the reason why Parisa is so excited about this thing is because creativity is a thing for her, for example. And then the other thing the badass needs to do is to get clarity on what values are important to other people. So that what we do is that we meet each other in the middle and not have a matchy value set, but at least create a complementary value set. So when we're communicating with each other, it becomes easier to understand where that other person is coming from so that we hit the ground running. We have alignment on the goals as well as alignment around the strategy to hit those goals. Another thing that I explore often with my badass clients is, they are so used to being Wonder Woman or Superman, they forget that it's okay to be Diana Prince or Clark Kent instead. There is beauty in being a hand raiser and asking for help. There is beauty in embracing vulnerability. There is beauty in sharing with other people, I don't think I can do this, or I'm stuck, can you help? And the reason why that's so beautiful is that there's a shared humanity there. I might not be good at X, you might not be good at Y. Maybe there's a way that we can find common ground together to be in support of one another. But when a badass doesn't show what their vulnerability is, it becomes very distancing with the other people, A, and then also B, it's just not believable. It's not believable that someone is Superman or Wonder Woman 100% of the time. It pays emotionally, professionally, whatever it is, to be a hand raiser to say, I don't know, can you help? So those are two of the tips or two of the things that I work on with my clients.
What what's the resistance that you encounter? What are you've got these high performers, these championship bulls, and you're saying these things like, hey, you need to be vulnerable, you need to be able to ask questions and not have all the answers and those things. But a lot of times are all of the things that have gotten us to the point we're convinced we need to do more of. How do you navigate them through some of those maybe points of resistance? What do they object to, and how do you get them through that?
Uh, Admitting where you might be vulnerable, especially for a high performer, that is tantamount to being naked, right? We are asking them to expose where their Achilles heels might live. And it is very hard for them to say, this is where I'm feeling most uncomfortable. It is easier to wear that suit of armor. And that suit of armor they put on maybe when they were teenagers, if not younger. And so when you are inviting them to take off that suit of armor, it's, what are people going to think of me when I show them where I'm weak? What are people going to think of me when I share what I'm scared about the most or what worries me? And letting them know that there is community building on the other side, that there is engagement and there's interest in who they are as people on the other side of that vulnerability, allows them to lean into the vulnerability a little bit, but they don't fully believe it until they start to try little experiments on their own. Rome wasn't built in a day, and certainly a modern badass isn't going to be vulnerable just like that.
That's awesome. It's important work, and to your point, helping people to be more impactful and shifting maybe some of their perspectives with your coaching is really important work. And I'm curious, on your journey, you said you were a corporate badass yourself, and you've shifted gears. Tell us about the journey you've gone through in what you're doing today to help others.
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you so much for asking. So, about 5 or 6 years ago, I was doing more consulting than anything else. And I noticed that I was a little bored. And I said, well, if I were to be my own consulting client, and I would say there is opportunity for product development, brand reposition, or whatever it is that the cool kids call it these days, what would I do? And the answer to my question was, I would give myself permission to be out loud who I've always been. I've always been the person with the gray hair before I actually had the gray hair. I was always the person that was comfortable with abstraction. I was always the person who helped people navigate around something that was a conundrum for them. In other words, I've always been an advisor. I've always been a coach. And so I said, what's stopping me from saying it out loud? And it turns out was head trash. And one of the things that advisors and consultants do really well is to help their clients get around their head trash and to vanquish the trolls that are living rent free in their heads and their spirits. So it's a very meta sort of exploration, but there you have it. That's the honest truth.
Well, it's a great lesson hidden in there, and that is being a consultant to ourselves. And it begins with, from what I heard from you, is asking ourselves the questions that we might be asking others,
Right.
and then helping ourselves. If we don't have a thinking partner, if we don't have our own coach that maybe is working us through some of these things, we can do a lot of that ourselves, whether it's through journaling or whether it's having those conversations on long walks to really say, what am I here to do, and what's
Yeah.
the joy that I get, and what's the gifts that I can share. So I think it's really inspiring.
Thank you. Yeah, it's every day is different, or regardless of the type of business that you're in. If you're in business for yourself, you know that every day is different. And especially in the advisory and the coaching work I do, oftentimes in the explorations I'm offering my clients, I chuckle because I'm like, huh, this is something I could also be telling myself. So it's in as much as I'm coaching or advising the person on the other side of the table, I'm not confused that I'm also advising and coaching myself at the same time.
And yet, we also find that it's much easier to give advice than to take it for ourselves.
Yeah, and that's where, as you know, having a growth mindset as opposed to a fixed mindset becomes so helpful. A dear friend of mine created this a reframe for me recently where she says, you can be committed to a goal but not attached to individual happenings or individual outcomes. So I'm very committed. I'm not attached to things that might happen in the day to day. So I can take learnings from regardless of what I do and use that in service of. Now, it's not always easy. Some days are better than others, but this commitment to being in a growth mindset as opposed to a performance or a fixed mindset definitely helps.
Very cool. So, how do you see speaking currently or in the future as a part of the work that you're doing?
Oh, that's a great question. And the way I see speaking is it's in terms of ripples of impact. I believe so strongly in my mission of being the world-renowned coach to badasses and those who lead them that I am committed to speaking to larger groups about them, particularly this idea of the opportunity cost of the ones that we'll never meet. Like that is, if we were to put a dollar value on it, it would be in the billions of dollars. And so I'm so committed, as I was saying before, I'm so committed to sharing this message that I worked with a keynote coach earlier this year. I've spoken at different events. I'm enrolling in some coursework in the early part of next year to do a better job of being the business of speaking, as well as doing a better job or being a better student in the art of speaking as well. There is nothing that I won't do in service of this bigger mission that I have in mind when it comes to the speaking portion of my platform.
Well, and nothing replaces a mission we're passionate about. And it's obvious that you're committed to that mission. And I'm excited to see more and more of the impact and the insights that you have for that audience. And I'd be curious as we, wind down our conversation here, if you could give yourself, you could write on a postcard and send it back in time 2, 3 years ago, as you're embarking on this journey, what's some of the advice that you might give to yourself on that journey?
Oh my gosh, it's advice that I would give to myself today, in addition to the person of 3 years ago. Slow down to speed up. Being in the moment and present in the moment is where we get really interesting messages, whether it's conversations like this or from our intuition or from peers or what have you. I have a tendency to move too quickly. And so when I really slow down and I'm grounded and present, how aware am I as to opportunity and what the next chapter could look like? So again, that's the advice to the Parissa of 3 years ago, in as much as it is the advice to Parissa of today.
It's sage, no doubt, and certainly advice that I can be taking on a daily basis. So, if you, let's say there's a modern badass that is seeing our conversation, or maybe it's a event coordinator, what are some of the best ways to follow your work and stay in contact with you, Parisa?
Oh, that's a great question. So I can be found on LinkedIn. I post daily on LinkedIn. I also have a newsletter that I publish on LinkedIn. And another way for meeting planners to find me is to email me, Parisa at sixsensestrategy.com. And also a fun thing, if you go to my website, sixsensestrategy.com, I have a modern badass quiz. Answer 7 questions, find out where you might live on the modern badass spectrum.
I love it. Everybody wants to know how much of a badass they are. And so go
Exactly.
to Parisa's website, check it out. Parissa Behnia, thank you so much for sharing your journey, your insights with us today. And I look forward to seeing more from you very soon.
Thank you so much, Dean. This is a wonderful conversation.
Take care.